Hello YouTube and welcome back to another book review. I'm your host Logan Albright, and today I'm going to be talking about a short story collection. I don't do these too often, but as some of you may know, I've become obsessed with this imprint of Penguin books called Penguin Science Fiction Classics with these white minimalist covers and this purple font. I think they're so cool. I love the design of them, and the curation of this is just so great. Every book that I've read in this series has been amazing. I haven't heard of most of them, and I've just really loved everything that I've come across. So I hope you like me talking about these because I have two more that I haven't finished reading yet that will be on the way that I'll be reviewing. But this one is Untouched by Human Hands by Robert Sheckley. And this is a short story collection, science fiction stories, originally published in 1954 in America. So a lot of these books in this series are foreign and have been translated into English. This one is originally written in English, which is nice. You never really know when you're reading a book in translation how much of the original you're getting and how much of your enjoyment is due to the quality or lack thereof of the translation. So I like to read things written in English for that reason, although there's a lot of amazing literature written in other languages. I like science fiction short stories in particular because I think the genre really lends itself to like just having a little interesting idea that you can develop over the course of like 10 or 20 pages and show off that idea, whereas you don't need a huge like arching plot. You don't need lots of really complex characters to develop. You just need a kernel of an idea, and you can develop that into a really interesting 10 to 20 page story. And that's what a lot of these great science fiction authors do. I've been talking about Philip K. Dick quite a lot lately. He's like my favorite short story writer. I've read all of his short stories. They're all genius. There's just this like so creative, just taking one little idea and developing it for a short amount of time. I like them better than his novels. And I feel that way about most science fiction books. Most science fiction novels, with a couple of notable exceptions, things like Dune that really stand up, I don't think are very good. But I think science fiction is a genre that just it excels at the short story. The short story is where it lives, and it's great. So it's nice to find a new author who I had not heard of, Robert Sheckley. Never read his stuff before. I didn't even know who he was, to read his stories. And it's kind of typical of mid-20th century science fiction. It reads a lot like the stories of someone like Isaac Asimov or Arthur C. Clarke or even Philip K. Dick. Maybe not quite as off the wall as Philip K. Dick's stories, but very much in that vein. If you didn't know who had written them, you might be able to pick out, guess that it was one of those other authors. They really feel similar in that regard. And because the genre has developed so much over the years, some of them feel a little bit cliche at this point. Some of the stories in the collection are a little bit like you kind of guess the twist coming before the twist comes. They feel like Twilight Zone episodes, and they've kind of been done before, but that's because this was written in the middle of the 20th century and not now. So we've had 70 years to develop these ideas and see them and see people copycatting them, and they may not feel as fresh as they otherwise would. But some of the stories in here really do feel fresh and are great. And what I like about it is that there's a variety of styles represented. They're not all the same type of story. There's a couple of stories that are quite humorous. There's one called Keep Your Shape that I find particularly funny in here, which is about a species of aliens that can kind of change their shape at will, but they're discouraged from doing so. They want to, they kind of have a religion out of keeping their own shape, and they come to Earth, and it becomes a whole occupational hazard of wanting to change their shape into other things. And that's actually really a humorous story. Some of the stories are almost like dark fantasy. There's a story called The Altar, which reminds me of the stories of someone like Lord Dunsany, who wrote these kind of wild, weird fiction fantasy stories. Some of them are like that. One of the stories which I really liked is called Windbird. Is a cautionary tale about mankind's use of technology, artificial intelligence, and our disregard for unintended consequences and our lack of long-term planning. And it's like really relevant to what's going on right now, and I think it's really clever, and I like those kind of stories a lot. My favorite story in the collection is the last story in the collection, as a matter of fact, and it's called The Seventh Victim. And apparently it was made into a film called The 10th Victim, which I haven't seen, but I think it's just an excellent story. It's kind of got a little bit of spy thriller in it. It's a little bit science fiction. It's a little bit romance. It's got a little bit of everything in there. It's got twists and turns, and I thought that was a genius story. So there's a lot going on here. There's something to please everybody. There's stories of different lengths. There's some that are like approaching 50 pages in length. There's some that's just a few pages in length. Really well covers the gamut of different types of stories really well represented in here. And so it's a short book. It's, how many pages is it? Let's see. 200 pages. But a lot of just like, if you like those kind of bite-sized chunks of science fiction, this is the kind of thing you'll love. And maybe you've exhausted the stories of all the kind of better-known writers of the genre. You want something a little bit different. I really recommend Untouched by Human Hands. He's probably done a lot of other collections. I haven't really looked into it, or novels as well. But this is his most well-known. And I think it is just a lovely little fun science fiction book. I will say it isn't as earth-shakingly unique as a lot of the other books I've read in this series. Like, I've gone on and on about how much I love Anna Kavanaugh's Ice. It's become one of my favorite novels of all time. I think it's just so unique and beautiful and wonderful. I felt kind of that way about A Billion Years Until the End of the World, which is a great, very unique Russian novel. I'm reading one right now, which I'll review in a couple, like maybe next week if I finish it in time, called The Hair Carpet Weavers. Again, I think it's a German one originally. Very strange, very unique story. This one's a little more prosaic in the fact that I have read stories like this before. Not exactly like this, but similar to this by other authors. But it's still a really great find, and some very good chunks of science fiction from someone who I'd never heard of before. So I can recommend it in that respect. I don't have too much more to say about it. There's a couple other stories that maybe I should mention in here. There's some social commentary. There's a story called Cost of Living, which is sort of economic critique of things like debt and, keeping up with the Joneses, that sort of thing. I think that's an interesting story, but it's a little bit dated. And then there's the initial story in the collection is called Monsters, which is maybe my least favorite story there. It was quite predictable, I thought. It's still well written, but fairly predictable given all the knowledge we have after this has been written, the 70 years of information we have. It's just hard to surprise modern readers with something that old at this stage. So, but overall it's a good mix, and I liked a lot of the stories a lot, and some of the others, even the mediocre stories, were still pretty good. So that's pretty much all I have to say. Untouched by Human Hands by Robert Sheckley. A really nice sci-fi collection for those of you who are hungry for more science fiction stories, short stories that are easy to read and fun, and there's some humor in there. I think you'll really like it. I'll be back next week with another book review. Hopefully I'll get to finish The Hair Carpet Weavers and talk to you about that, because that's a really interesting book, and I have a lot to say about that. Until next time, I've been your host, Logan Albright, and thanks so much for watching. Catch you later.